I would like to call the Fairfield County Council Public Forum to order. Winsboro, South Carolina, Monday, December 6, 2021, 6 o'clock p.m. to 7 p.m. Can we get an invocation by Vice Chair Ms. Green?
Let's bow our heads. Your Heavenly Father, as we come before you, we ask you for guidance and for patience and for understanding, Father, that we do the best that we can for the citizens of Fairfield County. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. We're down to opening remarks and ground rules. Myself, I certainly want to thank all of you for coming to this public forum tonight. Mr. Rainwater will present the proposed map and statistics that support the proposed map. We will allow him to complete his presentation prior to any questions or comments. In this public forum tonight, there will be no personal attacks on to or against any individual. Mr. Rainwater will answer the questions concerning the map or the statistics. Mr. Boykin, our attorney, will answer the political questions if there be any. The Fairfield County Council is responsible for the drawing of the lines for County Council and School Board. The redrawing of the lines is a constitutional requirement and must take place every 10 years. As a benchmark in 2011, the ordinance for redistricting passed September 26, 2011, with public hearing on the same date as the third and final reading. As a matter of fact, the second reading was voted unanimously without discussion. The public hearing is scheduled for December 13th, and currently the third and final reading of the ordinance. We have invited Mr. Rainwater from the South Carolina Revenue and Physical Affairs Office to review with us the proposed map and statistics. Again, we will allow him to complete their presentation before questions. The council values input and communication. All individuals wishing to ask questions or make comments must be acknowledged by the chair or our attorney who is assisting with the facilitation of this forum. Please respect others and limit your time to 3 minutes. Those in attendance are asked to refrain from disrupting the meeting by making noise of any kind, clapping, verbal feedback, which I'm sure none of you will do. Our hope is this public forum will be conducted very orderly and conducted with respect for each other. I've asked Mr. Boykin, our attorney, to help in facilitating this forum. Anyone who disrupts the proceeding will be asked to leave. Again, I'm convinced that this will not happen. The forum topic. A, an ordinance to adopt a redistricting plan for Fairfield County, South Carolina, utilizing the 2020 U.S. Census results. Council have been given a copy of the ordinance, so I'm sure you've gone through it and read it, but the ordinance, and I'll just read the headline: the ordinance adopting a redistricting plan for Fairfield County, South Carolina, utilizing the 2020 United States Census results. Whereas South Carolina Code, annotation 4-9-90, provides that all county council election districts must be reapportioned as to the population by the county council within a reasonable time prior to the next scheduled general election, which follows the adoption by the state of each federal decennial census. Okay, and now we have Mr. Rainwater.
Chairman Bill,
Yes, sir.
council members might have something they want to say. I think,
Okay.
I think to be transparent with the citizens of Fairfield County, I think we need to have this meeting live like we do other council meetings. I was told that you instructed staff today not to have it live. So there's a lack of transparency there for citizens. For some reason, we always have live council meetings. And for some reason tonight, Mr. Bell does not want this meeting to be live. So I make a motion that we continue to our normal council-approved practice of live meetings and posting afterwards.
I second it.
We're not prepared to do a live meeting. I did ask the IT guys before they left. Now, the meeting tonight will be recorded, right, Ms. Roberts? so that it can go on YouTube. So we're not prepared to do that.
But you
Thank you.
instructed him not to record it live.
I did not.
Yes, you did.
Thank you, Mr. Pauly. Okay, so, Mr. Rainwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Again, my name is Frank Rainwater. Pleasure to be here with you. Earlier this afternoon, I sent an updated letter. I was trying to anticipate more questions and put more information out about the map. Hopefully that was helpful to you. I hope that's been distributed and everybody has that. But for the benefit of all, I'm going to highlight some of the changes that were made or basically the map. I say the changes from your current makeup to what this draft proposal is for you tonight. Mr. Frontroff, just for your information, he's in Cherokee County tonight. We've got a lot of counties we're dealing with, and so we have to tag team these presentations. So to begin with, the first important thing is talking about, which I think discussed about deviation. When you've had a significant change in population, your population has declined, especially in the black population, and that's caused a difference among that one person, one vote. And in the benchmark plan, as we identified you, that the benchmark showed you had a total deviation of about 16%. You were way over the 10% threshold that the courts have identified. In the plan that's being presented to you tonight, that benchmark has been, that deviation has been reduced to 5.08%. So you're well within the tolerance line of what's considered one person, one vote. When we look at the racial makeup, or I should say the demographic makeups, I would like to highlight for you that basically all your 7 districts are relative in the new map are relatively unchanged to where you are in the benchmark. Overall, there were only 15 precincts that changed. You have over 1,200 precincts in this county. This proposed draft only has a change of 15 precincts, and I can highlight those changes for you. I know the new map is posted up there for you. But basically, your black and white population was relatively unchanged from the current status in there. In most changes, they were less than 2% among the black and white mix. In particular, when you look at some of the other details, I mentioned that 15 census blocks out of the 1,215 were shifted. District 4 was not changed. District 4 remains as it is right now. The resulting map does increase the number of split precincts by 4, but we did also made special caution to make sure that no incumbents, either in the county council or the school district, were put in the same district. So everybody still remains within their separate council districts and separate school board districts. To highlight just a little bit more of the detail for you there, District 1, there was 1 block that shifted into District 2 and 3 blocks that shifted into District 5. District 2 had the most changes. You had 6 blocks changed. District 2 had 2 blocks to go into District 3, 1 into District 6 and 1 into 7. District 3 had 1 block to move into District 5 from your current district. And then District 5 had 2 blocks to move into 3 and 2 blocks into 7. Those are kind of highlighted for you in the attached map. Your new district, or the proposed district, is the color. The red line is an overlay of your current district. So within those red lines, if you see a different colored district from what you are, that's what's telling you what's changed. And it's probably about the best or simplest we can make this. It gets real complicated with all these colors and the number of districts. But just trying to emphasize or let you see where those districts are changed. Overall, like I say, your overall deviation is now down to 5%. You have a lot of districts that are within 1% off of the target, with districts 2 and 3 being the two extremes there, about 2 and 2.9%. So, Mr. Chairman and members, that's an overview of the changes there, and I'll be glad to try to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions from council first?
I'll be glad to go first.
Okay.
Mr. Rainwater, when you talk about blocks, when you talk about 2 blocks move from one district to another, who's responsible for the moving of those blocks? Who decides what blocks move from what district to the next district?
Those were conversations we had with Mr. Bell.
Okay. Did you have any conversation with any other council members?
No, sir.
Okay. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Rainwater? Well, first of all, what is your position in your title?
I'm the executive director of the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Office.
All right. Wouldn't you agree that when you got 7 council members and a proposed map is sent to you for you to look at or your officers to look at, wouldn't you think that 7 council members should be involved in that proposed map?
I mean, naturally, we think it's the council maps, and the majority of council has to adopt these. Our process has been to work with one person is one person is information to help flow the input from the council to us. So yes, I mean we think everybody should be involved. You got council members and the public, but I'm not privy to what conversations Mr. Bell may or not had. I mean, he's the conduit that we work with.
Right. Who presented the draft map to you?
Mr. Bell met with us in our office, and we went through the maps and identified changes.
How did you know, and I think you already stated the answer, but how did you know what portions to remove or add to? And I think you already stated that Mr. Bell told you in conversation what portions of each district needed to come out.
Yes, sir, for the most part. I mean, once we look at that, I mean, then we have to look at how the statistics play out, and we'd have to advise to say, well, that got the deviation too much or too much or too below, but we worked at his direction.
In several emails that you sent to Mr. Bell, that Mr. Bell forwarded to us, you always state, once again, the draft map is based on direction you provided. Who are you referring to?
Mr. Bell.
Mr. Rainwater, do you remember making a phone call to someone in Fairfield County several months ago?
Yes.
You do? Do you remember in that conversation, you asked if anyone had the authority that could stop Mr. Bell from calling and interfering with the process?
I'm sorry, would you?
You remember in that phone conversation, you asked if anyone at the county had the authority from stopping Mr. Bell from calling and interfering with the process and showing up down at that office.
Did I ask anybody if he had the authority?
Did you ask anybody here in your conversation, the phone call you made, did you ask someone, was it anybody with the county that had the authority that could stop Mr. Bell from interfering with the process and showing up down there at your office?
Not that I remember. I mean, I returned a phone call. I didn't initiate a phone call. I know I had a phone call from someone in the county because people were questioning about getting started, but I don't remember anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rainwater,
Yes, sir.
when you was given this draft, or was, when you were given this draft, were you under the impression that all of the council members had been a part of this?
I had no knowledge on who he talked to or not. I mean, Mr. Bell came down, he said, when we talk about it, and he talked about the districts, but I don't know who he did or did not talk to. That's the best way I can answer that.
Okay, do any other questions from council? Do we have any questions from the public? Mr. Wright.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the map.
Okay.
As I understand it, some of the tenets of just redistricting, one is keeping communities together. One is to have contiguous districts, and one is to not have odd-shaped districts, and one is that the districts are compact. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Those are key tenets. Now, when I look at this map, and, sorry. When I look at this map, first thing that personally comes out to me is I look at where I live, carved out just a few homes that are within a community, the Blythewood Ridgeway community, on one side of 77, and this little sliver was pulled out of its community and of its natural boundaries, i.e. I-77. Would you say that that does not meet the criteria of keeping communities intact?
I will answer it this way. The lines have to be drawn somewhere.
Oh, I understand.
And something is going to get split one way or the other. And that is communities of interest are a criteria, yes. And you have to balance that with all the other factors of trying to get deviation down, in the demographics. I mean, unfortunately, and I recognize what you're saying, but when we look at this as a whole, something's going to get split. And when we try to do that, we look at all those factors. Now, I'm not sure if that one, if you're pointing to, is that a change or is it existing?
No, it's a stark change. We were in District 1, the handful of homes in there were bordered by 77. We have nothing, no community of interest there, but everything around us in District 1 and south of us is community of interest.
Mm-hmm.
Everything gravitates that way. So this is basically one street.
Mm-hmm.
I find that very odd, that just that small sliver with clear natural boundaries and a community of interest in a subdivision that particularly is all very similar both in likes and types of homes, lifestyles and everything. I find that very unusual. I also find when we talk about, and there's other issues of that too, and I don't want to take up the whole meeting, well, I could, but I won't.
Do it, man.
I want to point out the compact and contiguous. Now this to me, and it was similar last time it was drawn up, but this looks to me like a Picasso painting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any rhyme or reason in, and I don't see any compactness. I see this district going all the way up there, all the way down there, bypassing these two districts as a sliver. Now, technically that's contiguous, but it's a real stretch that bypass, go all the way there and all the way there. This would be a similar example. This would be a similar example. It jumps over two districts by going, like that. But frankly, based upon the guideline of community interest, contingency, we got a lot of work to do if we're going to meet those guidelines, in my opinion. And I'm not asking for yours now, but I again, it's a Picasso painting, and it just doesn't make any sense to me going by those tenets we talked about: contingency, compactness, no odd shapes. There's not an odd, non-odd shape in here. And community of interest. Don't forget that. There's a lot of community of interest that is split here, split here, split here, split here. And with a deadline, fortunately we don't have a deadline, a real deadline till March. Is that correct? 1st of March?
These need to be completed before filing opens in the middle of March.
Okay. All right, so we have the 1st of March. So a deadline to you, again, I'm asking your opinion, does a deadline of next week, when we've still got 3 months to go, make sense? When we've got so much work to do?
I mean, I will say, I mean, those are community decisions. I mean, I've got some councils that wanted it done by January 1st. Some are pushing it to March. I think that's a local decision on what the locals need to do for the implementation. I'm gonna dodge your question that way.
Well, I understand your answer, but let me ask you this. If we were going to get this to follow what I just said about the tenants the true tenets of redistricting. Those are universal, U.S. law. Wouldn't we have a lot of work to do if we wanted to reach community interest, justice, if we wanted to reach compact size, if we wanted to not have oddball districts, and if we wanted to have true contingency? Would that seem to be a lot of work to you to do?
It's a lot of work depending on how you define communities of interest. I mean, you have to, I mean, I see all this gray, the green area at the top. Now, obviously, as I stated up front, there are not many changes. This is basically how your districts are now. And so the plan has just 15 changes. But yes, I mean, if you take time, what is the community, if you want to define that and set that out. Unfortunately, census blocks are not in the same size. We don't have control on how the census defines that. Some of that's just the cards we're dealt. And it depends on where that population is spread out. But yes, I mean, you know Fairfield County much better than I do. And for you, I mean, that's where part of this process is to share ideas and thoughts on how these changes need to be occurred.
So, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I'm just saying, this is the way I read what you just said. If we're gonna get real community of interest, etc., then we need real community input. I know my community. Everybody here knows their community. They should have a voice in this matter so that we meet these criteria, is my point. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, I'm just saying that's how I interpret what you said. I'll repeat, if we're gonna get community interest done right, we're gonna have to have community input. That would mean we can't make a decision next week when 99% of the county has not even seen this map. That's all I have. Thanks for giving me the time. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Wanda Carnes, I'm on District 3, and I just want it noted, this goes back to 2010, actually. So however it got created in 2010, but we're the third, the city of Winsboro is the number one as far as population.
Mm-hmm.
The second highest is Ridgeway, the town of Ridgeway. The third highest population, the community, is the Mitford people here in the top right corner. We are mostly older, 50 plus, the majority of us. And we were split, our community was split dead in the middle in 2010.
Mhm.
So when we had to have a special election a few years back, it was simply because of the boxes, the voting boxes not being distributed or handed out correctly.
Mhm.
There again, it goes back to your District 3 are over here, and across the street, my neighbors in District 2.
Mhm.
So the whole community is separated. There's no plan. We like to plan. We have a great little recreation center that we spent way too much money for, nobody uses. But I mean, we just don't have a strategic plan that has been approved.
Oh, she ain't talking about strategic plan.
So, again, I think I'm like Randy, I think it needs to be community driven to see which district. And there again, I mean, the numbers are the numbers. I don't care about color, but our community needs to be put back together.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Started the meeting out by saying that you don't want any derogatory comments, so I'm going to refrain from making a derogatory comment. I just said that, so. But gerrymandering, this is supposed to be transparent. We are supposed to know upfront before you folks vote, before you put it out, what you're doing. That was not transparent. There was no transparency in this whole process. What really bothers me is at the last meeting, you told the gentleman, is it from your office?
Yes, sir, Victor.
Not to answer questions. How can we get information if the chairman is telling people, don't answer that? What's going on? What are we trying to figure out here? You want to do something fair for the community? You want to get everybody involved, or is it only your input? That's gerrymandering. That's the biggest. I'm unhappy with that. I think we don't have any transparency. And I'd like to see the whole process change. That's it.
Thank you.
wondering, I mean, I understand lines and all that. Have we ever had input on lines, or has it always been your decision to make in regards to where the lines are falling? I mean, because I know I'm from District 2, and my district has always been a strange shape, which is fine, but I just don't understand why now there has to be, well, I understand input is a good thing, but has there ever been input from the community in making these lines? Okay, that's the question.
Okay, I can try to answer that question if you want me to. One of the things is I look back at 2011 and went through the ordinance and also went through all the minutes. Okay, they didn't have a public forum last time to answer your question, and they did the third and final reading on the same day they had the public hearing.
My other thing is neighborhoods. I understand everybody speaking of neighborhoods and community feeling, but I do believe that an even ratio in regards to African Americans and Europeans or whites needs to be equal. I don't think one area should be dominant.
Thank you. Any other questions?
How you doing, Mr. Rainwater?
Hello.
In the beginning, when you were talking, you said there were like 1,200 precincts?
1,200 census blocks.
Okay.
I'm sorry, if I said precincts, I'm sorry. Yeah, there's 1,200 census blocks to build the precincts in the district. Yeah.
Can you, tell me how many precincts there are?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm sorry, I don't, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I just want that correct for you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for correcting me, so.
Are there any other questions?
Mr. Rainwater,
Yes, sir.
do you have a total number of each district on what they are losing, what they are gaining, whether my district's losing 20, gaining 30, per district? Do you have a breakdown?
On page 2.
Let me get you in the ballpark of that.
Mr. Rainwater, I did share the Mr. Victor Frontroth
Yes.
sent that information to me, just 2011 and the 2020 census. I sent that to Mr. Paul, and Mr. Paul and I had a conversation on the phone. I think it's about 45 minutes or so.
Are you
That's what you're talking about, Mr. Paul?
talking about from the current to the redistrict?
Yes, sir. The current plan now.
Okay. Let me give it to you this way. I haven't calculated. Under the current census count, District 1 has 3,078 people. Under this plan, and that was over, it was over the ideal by 85. Under this draft, it now has 3,003. So basically, you dropped about 75 people.
You're not doing it on voting age population, you're doing it on total.
Total population, total population. So, District 2, as of the census, had 3,207 people in that district. It was over the ideal by 214, and it was 7% above that ideal. It now has 3,058 people. So that's about 150 people, somewhere around 150. Don't hold me to the exact number, less.
Okay.
You want me to go all the districts?
Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. District 3. District 3 under the census had 2,756 people. It was under or below the ideal by 237. It now has 2,906. So it likewise gained about 150 people.
Okay.
District 4 was unchanged. It was 17 people above the ideal and still 17 people above the ideal. District 5 had 3,073 people. It was 80 above, and now it has 2,964. So it dropped about 110 people. District 6 had 3,082 people. It now has 3,081, so it lost about 81 people. And it was over. District 7, as of the census, had 2,742 people. It needed to pick up people because it was 251 people below the ideal. It now has 3,006. So it picked up about 250, 260 people.
Thank you. I have a comment I want to make. One of the things, if you look at 2011, at the census data, the standard deviation was 7.31. If you look at the census in 2021, the standard deviation is 5.08, which is a significant reduction in the standard deviation, which indicates a significant improvement of the lines. Okay, again, since you mentioned like District 1, if you look at District 1 last in 2011, they had 135 people over. This time they have only 10. So when you look at the total picture of these lines, they are significantly improved over 2011 with only 15 blocks, census blocks moved, which is a significant feat in itself. The point that, if I get to it, the sheet that Mr. Rainwater sent us, that I sent to council, is the point that he made is very homely. He says 15 census block of the 1,215 total blocks was shifted between districts. Let me say that again, 15 census blocks of the 1,215 total blocks were shifted between districts. I tell you, I guess, I mean, this is really, really good. If redistricting is something that you have to do every 10 years, you have to do it. Okay, and if you look at the lines, you can almost place that map over the other map, and you see how what you try to do is not change any you don't want to change the lines because it begins to shift too much. But one of the things we were going to do, another thing you have to be careful of, because one time they did make a change and it removed one of the school board members from their district. And so we had to go back and return that change because you couldn't make it. Because you have to have the incumbents in the district that they now reside.
Mr. Rainwater,
Mr.
go ahead.
Right.
I've heard a few comments, and I'm going to try to keep this as tactfully as possible. When you look at these two maps, why would you want to even compare yourself to 2010 census map? It was obviously wrong. It met none of those criteria that I met before. And we're trying to say, oh, we're good. That's like saying, well, Johnny, you scored a 50 on this test, and that's certainly better than the 45 you did last time. No, we deserve better. Fairfield's better than shooting for the bottom row. Fairfield's better than repeating mistakes like we did in 2010. That's obvious. Just all you have to do is look at the maps and say, yeah, both of them are screwed up. I don't want either. Yep, and as one lady pointed out on the screen, just because we didn't have input last time doesn't mean we shouldn't have maximum input this time. And if we really wanted to do it right, we would want maximum community involvement per the guidelines that are universal in the United States that I reiterated earlier. Community involvement. This doesn't look like a community here. How many people here saw this map before tonight? How many? So there's no one in the county that saw it except these guys. And they just saw it at the last minute. So you can't have community involvement and nobody is involved in the decision making or even has the information at their hands.
Thank you, Mr. Bright.
Ms. Bell. At the last council meeting, after hearing from Mr. Frontroth, it was very clear from him that all council members and definitely the citizens should be involved in redistricting. Mr. Bell left that night telling the public outside public hearing, no matter if you had public hearing or not, nothing was going to change. Is that not obvious that he is going to do it his way and not listen to the citizens of Fairfield County? On November the 23rd, he sent all of council an email stating we are scheduling a hearing for December the 6th. Since that date, I sent several emails asking for better transparency, for it to be published in the newspaper, an agenda sent out early so citizens would have time to plan, but it was not. The agenda went out at 4:30 p.m. this past Friday. I also sent a video link to all council members showing another redistricting happening and how professional and transparent it was. I was thinking Mr. Bell would take the hint, but he did not. Some citizens don't have access to internet, so the hearing should have been posted in newspapers, courthouse door, and other areas of the county. Mr. Bell also refused to do this. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me read the article from the paper. Fairfield County Public Forum. Fairfield County Council will hold a public forum regarding the redistricting plan for Fairfield County, utilizing the 2020 census on Monday, December 6, 2021, from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. in council chambers at the Fairfield County Government Complex, 350 Columbia Road, Winsboro, South Carolina. Representatives from the State Physical Affairs Office will be present to answer questions concerning the redistricting plan and map.
Was this before or after you have passed 2 readings and presented the map November the 22nd to your council members when you posted this public forum?
It's after the second reading.
After you passed the second reading?
Yes.
Correct. How do you expect to get public input if you posted after the fact? You've had 2 passings regarding redistricting. Why don't we have several maps to choose from versus 1? Why are you the only one that gets to say so in how this redistricting works? Why did they not have it?
Let me go ahead and try to answer that question. I am only one vote. Okay, I cannot pass an ordinance. Okay, and an ordinance any ordinance requires 3 readings. Okay, and a public hearing is required by law for an ordinance to be passed. Again, you need at least 4 votes to pass an ordinance. So I can't do that.
It just has to mark it as a quid pro quo with your 4 votes on it.
And Mr. Schaefer.
Yeah, so, thank you. That was a good put. You're only one vote. However, you always say, there's 4 of us, we're the majority. So your vote is his vote, it's Trav's vote, and her vote. Your vote is the 4 of them. You have the majority, you got a rubber stamp going on here. That's fact.
Well, we cannot determine who and why people vote how they do. But this was, it passed first and second reading with 5 votes versus 4.
With a teacher village, $500,000 in one district, a teacher village in another, it seems pretty apparent that they're trying to appease your agenda.
He's running his mouth.
Sir, we're not gonna entertain that in this public forum.
Statement I made.
Yeah. Ms. Jacobs.
I just have one question,
Yes, ma'am.
and this will be probably directed to you. Can other people present maps to county council?
That's up to county council.
Okay, then, Ms. Bell, can other organizations and private citizens, if they so choose, submit maps to you, to this council?
Ms. Jacobs, as you know, you all can present really anything to council. And, that's concerning maps or anything else, you can present to us. Okay, any other questions? Again, we want to thank everyone.
Let me ask you then, make sure I got my numbers together here. So now, we would only have 2 days to submit a map to you?
Which, I don't understand the
If I
question.
wanted to present a map of lines that I drew, I only have 2 days to get it to you?
2 days, why you mention 2 days?
You voted next week on it?
Yes, ma'am, that's next Monday. That's,
Monday.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, so now, we get this map to you all, will it be available to the public? If I submit a map to you, will it be available to the public?
Mr. Boykin.
Mr. Chair, council members, Mr. Administrator. The process belongs to the public. However, it's administered by the council. If a person or any group or individual has every right to submit whatever map they choose, whatever consideration is given is a part of the legislative process that the council is presiding over from that standpoint. Now, as I understand it, Mr. Rainwater, I'll ask you a couple of questions. Could you point to those parts of the pending map that you find to be out of compliance?
I mean, no, to answer your question, I mean, when you say compliance, I mean, it meets one
Outside of
person.
compliance, that one
Yeah.
person, one vote, community of interest. Where is the out of compliance now?
There ain't none.
I understand I mean, when you look at this, you balance everything. And I know people have expressed concerns about communities of interest. I have no way to judge that's a local decision. I can balance numbers and statistics, but I'd have no way of balancing what a community of interest is.
When you received the census figures for Fairfield County, and you looked at the existing map done 2010 census, was the population appropriately apportioned?
No, sir.
Okay. The changes that you have made that are being considered by the council now, does that comply with the law for reapportionment?
For the one person, one vote, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, if a person, any group wants to submit a map, they can submit a map at any time, here from there. Whether council has time or whether council chooses to consider it, that is a legislative process.
Correct.
I'm happy to try to respond to any other questions you may have as far as the law is concerned and as far as the process is concerned. Yes, sir.
The only law that you were talking about was the Civil Rights Act, one vote, one person.
Actually-
But are there other law, the rest are, rest guidelines and not laws, the other tenets? So there's no compliance actually implied or inferred. What is implied or inferred is good judgment.
The question you asked was what law am I referring to? If you will,
Yes.
I'll listen to you if you will, okay? And The law of one person, one vote is not a federal statute. It is a federal US Constitution.
Yes.
From that. So it is supreme, and we want to make sure that we comply with that. As far as the Voting Rights Act is concerned, that's a statute. It codifies some of the constitutional amendment as well, from that standpoint. The question of communities of interest is talked about in a lot of the jurisprudence that deals with the voting rights litigation that has happened over the years, from that standpoint. And so you look at various cases, and what you really try to do is come as close as possible to where you comply with that, from that. To be honest with you, when we start applying jurisprudence coming from the courts, then that's when we get this opinion and that opinion, and we try to do the best we can. Yeah. And that, it doesn't change things, but it makes it a little bit more complex than that. So I thought I would just share that with you.
Yes,
Okay.
but, of course, sure. The voting rights and the Constitution are joined in the sense that you said, but they're separate, but they're joined.
They're separate, but right, you would say that they're harmonized in a certain way, which means that you try to give meaning to both.
Yes, and they complement each other, no doubt.
Yes.
But the compliance part, I think, since there are guidelines from these tenets, these basic tenets, such as community of interest, although there is some legalities there.
Sure.
Aren't we, since we're so far off on rational, let's see these maps, rational execution, aren't we leaving ourselves vulnerable to lawsuits?
You are asking a lawyer to prognosticate on vulnerability to lawsuits, okay? I'm looking at one map that existed for 10 years, and I would have to ask, how many lawsuits did you have for the map from 2010?
Mr. Barkin, I know of none.
Okay, so we know that that stood the test of time for 10 years. We don't know what this will, but we'll have to see. We recognize that it complies with the applicable law as we stand here tonight from that standpoint. So I will not prognosticate on, A, the possibility of litigation, B, the outcome of litigation.
So it is possible.
Anything is possible.
It is possible.
Certainly.
And because no lawsuits were brought up in 2010, I think it's more reflecting of the apathy of the community at the time.
Sure.
Which is more in tune to what impacts the community at this time, which may lead to more lawsuits, litigation, especially if we don't fully vet this process through the community. If we fully vetted this process through the community, with more town halls, with more input, with 40 maps, with 40 citizens maps, wouldn't we be less vulnerable to lawsuits if we did that?
I cannot tell you whether you would be less vulnerable or more vulnerable because I don't know what the outcome would be. Because you're talking about the process versus the result.
Okay.
And you're assuming that this result is already, for some reason, inappropriate. And I get that, from that standpoint. But for me to tell you what the likely outcome would be, to be honest with you, that would be inappropriate. The process that you described, I cannot tell you that it would give you something that was constitutional. Because I don't know what it would present. But we do know that what we're talking about right now is constitutional. We do know that what we're talking about right now does comply with the law and what the law requires from that standpoint. So what you're talking about is a process, not necessarily a change, because, to be fair to you, what you're talking about may leave things as they are. It's just that everybody now would be aware of it. I get that. But, just to be clear, that the process that you're talking about does not guarantee that you'd be inoculated or completely immune to lawsuits.
But it would at least guarantee some inoculation against public sentiment towards the process.
Okay,
I think that's pretty obvious.
No, I know what you're saying, and I tend not to tread on those kinds of things. I try to keep it as close to the law as possible.
I understand.
And what
I'm trying to talk about human interest and common sense and human behavior.
I will concede all of those to you.
The whole process, any process is guided by human behavior. But how we interact. That's where the processes go. And human behavior leads us to a point. It might lead us to lawsuits, but at very least, as one who has been engaged in politics, the more open, if you can't read the book on government, the more open and more transparent the process, the more buy-in from the public.
None of those points I'll argue. You were asking me about the legal piece.
Understood.
And I feel.
I appreciate your time and thank you for your answers. Thanks for your civility.
Okay,
I just want to make one comment, like from a school teacher's perspective. The word representative means just that it would represent the constituents within a district. The map does not allow for that to happen. Based on how stretched it goes across our rural community, there's no representation. I don't even know my representative, and I'm pretty out in the public, so I'd like to make that point, that stretching from one side of the county, as big as this county is, to the other, it's not conducive to accurate representation.
okay, again, thank you. Okay, again, we want to thank everyone for being here tonight. So again, thank you. I do want to make this point, again, is that as we look at the, at the standard deviation, with this map versus the map in 2011, it has been significantly reduced to 5.08 standard deviation, which is significantly improved over the redrawing of the map in 2011. And also want to make sure we did put it in the paper, okay, and so we did advertise. So if nothing before us, can we get a motion to adjourn?
So
Okay,
move.
okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just one last question. So you've heard from people tonight, and I think the basis is, this is very short notice, the ad in the paper, the second reading. Don't you think it would be the best interest of the community if you extended this out a little longer, take another couple of weeks, let everybody get familiar with what's going on, before we have a third reading and a final vote? Did you get an input from everybody?
Again, I'm not going to make that decision here tonight, just me one. So again, thank you for your time. And can we get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
It's been moved and second that we adjourn. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposers, nay. So let the record show it's 6-0 to adjourn.
Yeah, thank you. That's all right.
I didn't mean to give you a hard time.
You're not giving me a hard time.
Okay.